Let's go to another election, though. Looming in New South Wales. 25 days now until New South Wales people go to the polls. Dominic Perrottet, if the polls are believed, closing the gap there with Labor. But there's a threat for the Libs in teal seats. These teal independents are making a move. And, of course, out west, you've got very popular Fairfield Mayor Frank Carbone canvassing whether he might support some independents or run himself. Let's get a man to take us through all the detail there, fair bit of it. One Nation leader in New South Wales, Mark Latham. Joining me now for the campaign wrap-up. Mark, great to have you on the program as always. We'll start with Frank Carbone. We're not sure if he's going to run. He did this sort of dance in the federal election as well. But let's have a listen to what he said today. Have a listen.
I'll put my community first. My community has missed out for far too long.
There's two things that you disagree with Chris Minns on vehemently. So how could you back him on that?
Well, I can't back him on transport. There's no doubt about that.
Right.
I'll make that really clear.
And you don't back him on gambling? Or do you
I don't back him on gambling because I live in this community and I know the problems of gambling.
Now, he was instrumental to Daly winning against Christina Keneally last May. So is he going to run, do you think, Mark Latham? But even if he doesn't, how influential will he be?
Well, he's a powerhouse out Fairfield way. Chris Bowen's electorate federally, Peter, on the basis that when he was elected as mayor, he got 75% of the primary vote. Now, if you'd said 20 years ago, anyone as an independent in a place like Fairfield could get 75% of the primary vote running directly against the Australian Labor Party, they would have locked you up for being crazy. So Carbone is a force. He was propelled to support Daly successfully in the seat of Fowler because of another Labor Party insult. Pre-selecting Christina Keneally from Scotland Island, way north of Sydney, to run for the very needy communities of Cabramatta and Fairfield. So whatever Carbone does in this state election will have an impact. I'd expect if he runs for the seat of Cabramatta or Fairfield or has a running mate in the other electorate, he'll win both. And that's bad news for Labor because they're dropping 2 seats when obviously they need to pick up electorates to form a government.
Give me your take on this teal threat. It's running pretty hard at the moment in the northern beaches. There's a poll conducted by the Australian Financial Review. There's a teal independent within striking distance in the seat of Pittwater. This, of course, is held by Liberal Rob Stokes. He's retiring. Rory Amon is running for the Libs. The teal candidate is Jackie Scrooby, neck and neck, 48-52. Pretty tight. They did well in May, the teals, absolutely at a federal level. They completely bombed in Victoria. What's your take in this race?
Well, there's certainly a threat in seats like Pittwater, Manly, Willoughby and Wakehurst. The Liberals are worried about losing Wakehurst, not necessarily to a teal, but there's a community independent, a former mayor running there. So the threat on the North Shore of Sydney is real. Thankfully, that's not One Nation territory, so the teals aren't my problem. I think the teals are part of the difficulty in state politics and getting a rational discussion about energy policy, because the teals ultimately are the wealthy politics of indulgence, people who've got so much money in life, they think they can save the planet. Their own livelihood is not threatened. They're happy to sacrifice tens of thousands of jobs in the coal industry in the Hunter Valley, where that employment is desperately needed. And I suppose for the Liberal Party, it's now part of their split identity, their split personality, where Matt Kean waves the white flag to the teal, whatever they say on climate change, the risk of blackouts, rising electricity prices in New South Wales because we're rushing to 100% renewables. Kean says, yeah, well, we'll do all of that. We'll do all of that because of the teal concerns, plus spending billions of dollars in the budget on so-called female programs that don't benefit women actually in need in the western suburbs of Sydney. So Matt Kean has surrendered to the teals. But the feedback I'm getting from One Nation candidates in the Hunter and Western Sydney, working class heartland, is that Matt Kean is the most despised politician in the history of state politics. Yeah,
I don't think you're wrong there. Give us your take about the general mood of the electorate, because we saw that news poll. There was some positives there, if you want to read them up, for the Premier Dominic Perrottet. A much smaller gap than I think had been reported in the past there. The primary voters sort of moved 37. Things were tightening, we're told. You've got a good nose. You're out on the ground. Give us your sense of things.
Well, I think a couple of things are happening. The Albanese honeymoon is coming off. The Liberals last year were saying that the Scott Morrison factor was poison in their polling, and that's washed out, I think, over Christmas. And now the Albanese is breaking promises such as on superannuation. So that honeymoon is ending, which is bad news for Chris Minns. But I think primarily Minns has adopted the Albo tactic himself of just announcing little trinkets, of dribbling out minor policy announcements, things that are on a small scale, not getting into trouble, a small target strategy, trying to coast into office. I was worried about Chris Minns when he kept on counting down the days to election on the 25th of March. If you're watching the clock in politics, instead of giving the electorate actually something significant to vote for, then you're in trouble. And I think if you sat a focus group down, or a group of people in Western Sydney, and said, what does Chris Minns actually stand for, they'd really have trouble with an answer. Any substantial answer to a policy idea, an initiative for which he's pinned his political reputation. So I think he's in difficulty in that regard. But on the other side, Peta leads an old government asking for 16 years. They've had their troubles. We've got forecasts of blackouts, rising electricity prices in New South Wales, a school system that's got the fastest falling results in the world. They're major policy failures that neither side is really talking about. So that plague on both houses, the overall decline in the combined primary vote of the major parties continues. And I've got to say, we're getting tremendous feedback for One Nation and the solutions we're putting forward in the energy and schools policy arenas.
Yeah, it's a bit of a low energy campaign from those two leaders. I mean, you're right to point out 12 years with the government, they're asking for a term. That's sort of the tipping point often times for voters. But on the other side, Minns is no Malinowskis. He's not driving votes to him. He's hoping the government's going to fall over, or antipathy towards the government's going to bring them down. So it'll be interesting to watch. Let's hope the campaign fires up a bit. Mark Latham, thank you, and hopefully we'll catch up again soon.